Greetings and welcome to the United States Transhumanist Party Virtual Enlightenment Salon. My name is Gennady Stolyarov II, and I am the chairman of the U.S. Transhumanist Party. Here we hold conversations with some of the world's leading thinkers in longevity, science, technology, philosophy, and politics. Like the philosophers of the Age of Enlightenment, we aim to connect every field of human endeavor and arrive at new insights to achieve longer lives, greater rationality, and the progress of our civilization. Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to our U.S. Transhumanist Party Virtual Enlightenment Salon. Today is Sunday, August 9th, 2026, and we have a fascinating and unique conversation in store for you today about an achievement that some might call superhuman. And we are the Transhumanist Party. We seek to encourage people to go beyond conventional limitations, to push boundaries in good ways, ways that extend health and longevity. And I think our guest today is an example of this, and he achieved this with the human equipment that we presently have. So he didn't even need futuristic technologies to achieve what he achieved. But we are joined by our Director of Visual Art, Art Ramon Garcia, and our special guest today is Mike Fitzsimmons, also known as Fitz. I have known him now for several years. He is an ultra runner and fitness coach who has completed numerous races of a wide range of distances, and he has inspired others to do the same. I have witnessed it myself, how he lifts up people in the running community in Northern Nevada. He ran his first marathon in 2022, and I remember when he spoke to our running club about that, and he has since completed multiple 50-kilometer races as well as a well-known 100-mile race, the Canyons endurance runs. And now he has completed what was officially a 178-mile race, but he went above and beyond. He added a 4-mile extension to that. So this is why, in essentially promoting this event, I pointed out he ran 182 miles. So that's remarkable for any human, but we'll explain why it's especially remarkable that he did it in this context. So Mike is widely known and highly regarded within the running community of Northern Nevada. He has helped many people achieve their fitness goals, and I think one way in which he has done that is by inspiring people. So I wanted to show you the premise of the relay race that Mike did. So this is a map of the course for the Reno-Tahoe Odyssey. And the Reno-Tahoe Odyssey has been in existence now for a number of years. It involves officially a 178-mile course that goes from the city of Reno around to the California side of Lake Tahoe through Truckee, and then around Lake Tahoe, around the southwestern part of Lake Tahoe, and then down into Northern Nevada, again, down into Carson Valley, past the small town of Genoa, and then into Carson City, which is the capital of Nevada. And then it goes a bit to the northeast and kind of winds its way up some steep terrain, going up to Virginia City. And then it comes down from Virginia City, again, down a steep grade into Reno, where the last 4 legs of the race are held. So this is indeed an odyssey. And for most people, they complete the odyssey in a team of 12. And some people who are particularly courageous, particularly resilient, choose to do what is called an ultra team, which is a team of 6. And you can do the division yourself. For a team of 12, each person runs 3 legs. For a team of 6, each person runs 6 legs. So what's remarkable about Mike is that he chose to do this entire course in a team of one. So he ran all 36 legs by himself. So let that sink in for a moment. And now, with that introduction, I want to give the floor to Mike to tell us a bit about his story. Tell us about what led up to this decision to run the entire RTO, what motivated you, how you prepared for it, and then how you went ahead and did it. And you became the second person in history to do that entire course by yourself. The first person is Juan de Oliva, whom I've met as well, and he's a remarkable runner. He did it on his own in 2014, but you not just repeated his accomplishment, you added 4 miles to it, and you set a new course record. So tell us about all that, Mike.
Thank you for the intro, Gennady. That was very elegant. So, you know, I, like you said, did my first marathon in 2022. Before I did my first marathon, I actually participated in the RTO on a full team of 12, which makes it for me all that much more special to come back, you know, 4 years later and do the and completely the loop myself, because since the first year I've done it like kind of you mentioned, so many different ways on a full team. I've done it on an ultra team. So when I did the solo effort, I had so many memories, you know, from all those years, and it was really special. But anyways, you know, I started running in 22. And before that, I was into cycling, so like road biking. But before 2022, I was never really a runner. Did my first marathon, and then I was doing Biz Johnson, and so I think I was doing the 50K the following year. And I thought 50K was the kind of the granddaddy of ultras, right? I had no idea that people ran further than 50K. And there was this lady, and she was, I would say, like mid 40s, maybe early 50s. And she was coming up from behind me around mile, I want to say like 20, 22 of the 50K. And I was having a tough time. The heat was setting in. It was my first 50K. I had the nausea, I had the cramps, I had the whole thing, you know. And she was feeling really good, and I could tell she wanted to conversate with me. And she comes up and she's like, "Hey, how's it going?" And I'm like, "Well, not so good. I'm kind of going through a little bit of low right now, you know, but I'll get through it." And she's like, "Oh wow, is it your first time?" And I was like, "Yeah, this is my first ultra, you know, first 50K." And she's like, "Oh wow, that's beautiful." And I'm like, "It doesn't feel beautiful right now, but I appreciate it." Like, she was so positive and so nice. And I turned the table and I was like, "So what about you? Or have you done this before?" She's like, "Yeah, you know, I'm just using this 50K as a training run for my 100 miler." And then that's when it hit me, and I was like, "Wait, you're going to run 100 miles?" And I had no idea that was humanly possible. I asked her all the questions that I might get asked here today. Like, you know, do you sleep? Like, do you do it all in one go? Like, and, you know, I went on to finish that race, and I went down the rabbit hole on, you know, Western States, the oldest 100-mile race in history. And I just learned a lot about the distance, and it just fascinated me. But I knew that I couldn't really go. There's not much success that I've seen in going from 50K straight to 100 miles. So I knew that I needed to kind of climb the ladder. So from that year 23, I just kind of went up, and I did a few more 50Ks, 50 milers, 100K. I've done 200 milers last year in 2025. And I just think all that base training, you know, because training for each of those events, I believe made my body more resilient and kind of adapted it to that distance. And so it's interesting, though, because as I talk about climbing the ladder, right, you know, 50K, 50 miles, 100K, 100 miles, beyond that, there's not really much. If you look at races, like if you go into researching races, there's not much in between 100 miles and 200 miles, which kind of sounds crazy. Essentially, you're doubling the hardest thing you've ever done, right, as your next step. So I was looking at a few, you know, 200-mile races. There's one called the Tahoe 200 right in our backyard. Beautiful course. There's a newer one called the Mammoth. which was designed by one of my favorite runners, Sally McRae. So that kind of spoke to me a little bit. But when I looked at the RTO, just the fact that it's, you even showed the map, it's one big loop. You get to see so much, the High Sierra, just Lake Tahoe, beautiful, beautiful terrain. And like I said, having done it the first time on a full team in 22, that was really special to me. And I found out Juan had done it a while ago. And so I knew it was possible. I knew, it wasn't impossible. This has been done before. It's been a while, but it's been done before. And so I have a pretty good relationship with Matt, owner of Reno Running Company, who now owns the race Reno-Tahoe Odyssey. And if I was going to do it, I really wanted to do it right. I wanted to do it proper. So I reached out to him and basically requested politely a solo entry. And he first kind of turned me down in a very polite way, but just kind of said, hey, we don't offer that. When Juan did it, we didn't own the race. There's a lot of liability. And I understood. And I basically begged and pleaded with him and just told him I would sign whatever waiver and, go through whatever process is needed. And it took him, I want to say, about a couple months because he had a lot of work to do on his end, which I didn't know. There's a lot of agencies, I think over 20 agencies that have their kind of hands in this race for permitting purposes. And so he basically had to go to each one of them and stick his neck out, which I really appreciate. And, not only say, hey, I know you gave us the permits for this race. Thank you very much. But there's also this guy that wants to start a day early and do it alone. What do you think? And I didn't know this because I wasn't in the room, but all those agencies said, hey, you know what? We want to see this get done too. And he got back to me and said I believe it was February, do you still want to do this thing? And I was like, 100%. And I was kind of training the whole time for it anyways, in case he got back to me. So the training kind of started beginning of the year. And just a lot of base miles. I was doing probably, I would say mid volume, because I know a lot of ultra runners that do upwards of 100-mile weeks. For 50Ks and 100 milers. I was doing around 70 to 80 mile weeks. Usually I would do like 10 miles in the morning before work. That also allowed me to get some headlamp training in because that meant I had to be on the road by like 3:34 in the morning. So it really got me used to running it in the dark, different times a day. And then I would do, back-to-back long runs on Saturday, Sunday, because I have those days off of work. So I would do mostly time on feet. I wasn't really concerned about miles because I knew that this was going to take me upwards of 40 hours. So I would really just on my long runs target hours. I would maybe do like a 4-hour on Saturday and then a 2.5 on Sunday. And I would kind of go with that for the majority of my training. I did a lot of training races. I think that makes the journey a lot more special. To kind of work in races. Like I know you do Gennady as well. You do a lot of 10Ks in between your half marathons and vice versa, or 5Ks in between your 10Ks. And I think it's really good for, pushing the body. I think it's a different stimulus than a workout is, and allows you to sometimes reach greater heights that a workout doesn't allow you to do. So I really like racing into fitness. So I did a few races, the Paiute Meadows 50K, and then a couple other ultras, Formidable 50K out of Auburn, just in preparation for this 178 mile race. And from there we just took a 2-week taper, kind of like I would for any other marathon or ultra marathon. Carb loaded the week of, and we kind of rolled into it. I had to start on Thursday night. All the other teams start Friday morning. So I started 6 p.m. on Thursday ahead of all the teams, which was really cool because Reno Running Company, they threw me a big send off they have a mandatory captains meeting, which all the captains of the full teams are to attend. And so I had a really big send off. Even my running club, McKellar Running, MRC, they had a representative from each of their teams because we staff quite a few RTO teams, and they had a representative from each team run out with me on my first mile or so of that initial leg, which was really special too. So in terms of the preparation, that's kind of how it was. I would say mid volume, just making sure that I was running it all different times a day because that was going to be required, and a lot of pavement, because pavement and concrete are less forgiving on joints and ligaments than trail is. And I knew that, 80% of this race was going to be road. So I wanted to really kind of thrash my body on pavement during the training to get it durable enough to withstand 150 miles of pavement, essentially. So that was very important too. I think for any race, kind of training to the specificity of the terrain you're going to be racing in is very important. If it was a mountain race, I would have spent a lot more time in the mountains. And I did do some climbing because, like you mentioned, there is some vert in there. I want to say in total, it was about 17,000 feet of climbing. And so I did do some hill training, but I mean, in context, a lot of my 100-mile races, which are almost half that distance, have over 25,000 feet of climbing that I've done. So it really wasn't all that hilly. I think it was a lot more important for me to train on the pavement, again, just to get my body durable, and also GI training. There's a lot of runs in the morning that I knew I could do fasted without carbohydrates or without calories. But I would purposely intake those calories on my run, not because I felt depleted, but just to train my GI system or my gut. That way, when I was taking upwards of 80 grams of sugar an hour during the race for 40 hours, my gut didn't go, "What are you doing to me? We haven't done this before." So I believe that was also very important in the training. So.
Yes, fascinating. And thank you for sharing these insights into how you trained. I think this will be helpful to a lot of runners with a variety of racing ambitions. So some who might just be seeking to get started and build their endurance, and others who might be interested in the kinds of distances that you have completed. And I will also put up two pictures from your race. So this one shows you in Virginia City. Now, Virginia City is a very interesting place. It used to be the most populous settlement in Nevada during the silver rush of the third quarter of the 19th century, and it has a lot of these interesting historic buildings. But this would be at the conclusion of leg 30, which is one of the most difficult legs of the RTO. And I actually have run leg 30 twice myself as part of a relay team for the Capital Odyssey, which is the last third of the RTO. And that's pretty much a continuous climb for about 3 miles until you get into Virginia City. And then it's a nice flat run, which is quite refreshing. So you look good in this picture. You look like you're enjoying yourself. So I wanted to show our audience that. And then this one is you on the final leg of the RTO, and you're running with your mom, who was part of your support team. So you had pacers throughout to make sure that you stayed on course, essentially, and that you got the support that you needed. But this leg also has a significance to me because I've run this leg twice as well as part of the Capital Odyssey, and I've also run it in various training events. So I know this terrain quite well, and I can only imagine what you would have felt at the time, the kind of exhaustion that you were dealing with after having gone all that distance. But hopefully you were also inspired that you were just that close to the finish. So tell us more about the experience of actually running the race and what you encountered, what you found more challenging than you expected, what you found easier than you expected, and some of the notable events that transpired.
Yes. So for the premise, I just want to go over a little bit on the separate set of rules that were set for me because I was a solo athlete. They want to make sure I was taken care of. So I had an email from Reno Running Company that was basically my Bible of rules that I had to follow. Again, I was starting Thursday at 6 p.m. ahead of the race. So all the exchange points were not staffed. Therefore, we had to self-support pretty much our entire race up until, I want to say, the second night into that next morning. So one of the rules that Reno Running Company had set for me, which I appreciate, was that I was to have a pacer for every single mile, pretty much. So I had to staff almost an ultra team just to run with me, essentially, at different parts, right? Because I couldn't have one person do the whole thing with me, so I split it up. Everybody ended up running from anywhere like of 18 miles to I think Isaac ran almost 50 miles with me, one of my pacers. So everybody kind of just took different sections of the course, and I think we strategically placed everybody who was, really good, a lot of really good friends of mine, people I've raced with before. My buddy Travis, who's also coached me for my first couple 100-milers last year, and has continued to be a mentor to me. He was my first pacer, so all of my my running squad was very special to me, and they kept me safe. They kept me somewhat on track. We'll get more back to that later. But they kept me safe, and more importantly, the record wouldn't have gotten done without them. So on top of, we had Travis, Rosie, Isaac, Matt, and Heidi all pacing me at different sections. Now, on top of that, I was also supposed to have at least one crew vehicle that was to follow me the entire race. We ended up having two vehicles just because we wanted to cover all of our bases. And my mom was one of those drivers, as well as one of my clients that I coach in the gym. Her name's Anna. So really appreciate those guys. So it was my legs that did the running, but it definitely it wasn't done alone, and they really kept me motivated. And it was really hard to quit on myself, because I knew that if I quit on myself, I was also quitting on them. So they really added an X factor, I think, to this whole thing. Again, we start Thursday, 6 p.m., and Travis is my first pacer. Again, another thing that was really special about that was MRC, McKellar Running Club. They had a representative from each of their RTO teams to run out with me. So it wasn't just Travis and I on that first almost whole leg, I had about, 10 pacers, which, I felt like I was, going to war with the army. It was amazing. And so we run through downtown, and as soon as we leave, actually, Travis, it was funny because we were standing at the start, and Matt's counting down, and he always says to each team, if you've been to the start, you know this, Janai, too. He says, your adventure begins now. And so he said that, right? And Travis even told me, Travis is not an emotional guy, right? And Travis even told me, as he said that, he got chills. And I was like, man, we're doing this. Like, this is happening. And as we left, I was just like, man, this is crazy that I have to come back here like in 2 days, and that's if everything goes well, right? It just kind of hit me, and I was like, man, all right, well, we're going in the right direction. So we get going, and, because we started at 6 p.m., Dog Valley, which is one of the more infamous climbs as well. It's leg 4. Now, because we started at 6 p.m., we actually hit that at night, which I was fairly happy about, because usually when you hit it in the day, you're cooking in the heat. That's an exposed climb. There's no shade. There's nowhere to hide. So being that we hit it at night, I was kind of stoked. I was kind of excited. Now, the issue with that is it's all trail. And at night, I've never seen it at night. And Travis has never seen it at night. And at the top of that climb, you have a fork. And you can go about 4 different ways. Okay. And now, because the course wasn't set up, there's no markings. And we took the wrong fork, and we added about 2 miles in the wrong direction before we realized that we were going in the wrong direction. And we had to backtrack. And that's where the 182 miles over the 178 miles comes in. And I would like to say that I received that well, but I didn't. And I was very discouraged, because like you mentioned, Gennady, I was not trying just to finish this. I was trying to break the record. And I almost pulled the plug right there. I was like, I can't be adding 4 extra miles. Like, this is crazy. Why am I going to keep running to not break the record? And my team, like I said, they really remotivated me and said, hey, it's so early. You have all this time to make it back up, right? And they were correct. They were so correct. They were so right. And from there, I just kind of focused on running a little bit harder than I had anticipated to, not for the whole race, but for those next, into that night, right? Which, I started at 6 p.m. So I was roughly fresh that whole night. That whole night, pretty much, I ran. There were not really any walk breaks for that whole night, and the temperature helped too. So I basically ran through that whole night into the next day, which brought me to the west shore of Tahoe. That was beautiful, like, seeing the sunrise over Tahoe and coming up in through that. And then what happened was we went through the Emerald Bay climb, and then we went back down through the South Lake area. And that's why I really had some issues. That was around mile 80, I want to say. And the flat section actually through Tahoe, because it was such a repetitive motion on my legs. And when it's flat, you would think, oh, it's easy because you're not climbing, right? It's not as exerting. But the issue also on the other side of that is because it's one grade continuously, you're putting so much strain on one particular part of your muscle groups. And i.e. that's my hamstrings, essentially. Okay. And so my hamstrings were just getting murdered on this flat pavement. And again, I think training on the pavement helped, but there was just no denying that it was really degrading down to my posterior chain, the back of my body. And it got to the point where my hamstrings would cramp up and it would cause my foot to go numb, and my foot would actually start to turn in. So if this is my right foot, it would kind of pronate, it would kind of turn in on myself, and I would just kind of run through it painfully. But then it got to the point where it would turn so much to where my foot was like this, like sideways. And I was pretty much running on my ankle. And it was really discouraging because that section is so flat and so runnable that when that happened, I had to tell my pacer, hey, we need to walk. Like, I cannot run. And I'd walk for forever, it seemed, until my foot would start to kind of loosen up and turn out. And I'd start to run again. And then it would start to go sideways again. And that happened for about like 10 miles, and I knew that I was way off a record pace, and it was really discouraging, and I had to do something. I had to fix it. Right. So we came in, and meanwhile, this whole time, my crew is leapfrogging me in these follow vehicles. Right. So I'm stopping every 10K or so, 10K to 10 miles. And I'm seeing my people, mainly so I can get like my bottles topped off. I can get more calories. That way I'm not carrying so much with me the whole time. But also so they can problem solve, right? Like when stuff like this happens, it pays to see my people. So that way I can have all these brains instead of just mine, which is kind of mush because I've been running for so long, kind of operate together and problem solve, because that's really all this is. It's running, but it's continuous problem solving. Anytime something goes wrong, you have to address it. You have to fix it because it'll just get worse later on. So I went in, I told my crew about this whole foot thing, and I was like, we need to fix it. If we don't fix this, then there's no way this is happening. And Matt suggested that he foam roll my posterior chain and massage it. And he also had, because I like to keep things fairly natural, but he also had some CBD lotion just to kind of calm down the inflammation that I was experiencing in my hamstrings. And I was like, dude, I will try anything. So there's going to be video in the documentary. There's a documentary crew filming me the whole time too. There's going to be video of him basically rolling out my butt and like rubbing this cream on it so that way I can get back on the road. And I swear, man, after he did that, it took a little bit of time, but I was running again. And it was good because at that point I was just about to go back up Kingsbury grade, which is another really, really big climb. You're basically climbing out of South Lake Tahoe up over that mountain to get back into the Carson Valley, essentially. So it's a huge mountain you have to climb. And I was really glad that my legs were working again. And I know you guys saw in that photo of me going up Virginia City, I had my poles in my hand. I used those on a lot of the major climbs, mainly because it helped my back and it helped my posture stay proper and upright, because when you're climbing, it's really easy to get hunchback and kind of hunched over. And when you spend a lot of time in that position, it really wreaks havoc on your lower back. So the poles not only helped with, leverage, right? Because I'm also using my arms and my legs to climb, but also just keeping me upright and keeping my posture good, which I think preserved my body again over time. So I picked up my poles. We climbed up Virginia City. I also picked up a new pacer, Isaac. It's always good to have a fresh set of legs, fresh perspective, because they're all excited to go in the first few miles, So we're climbing up Virginia City and we go back down And then we hit Genoa Valley, which I knew that was just going to be a slog, man, because again, it's just a lot of flat. And it's kind of flat, but it's also kind of false flat. It's gradually up as you're going all the way through that Genoa Valley into Genoa and then Carson City. And that was going to be night 2. We were going through night 2 the time we were going through Carson City and Genoa. This whole time, by the way, I had not got passed by a team, which I didn't realize was because one of the aid stations wasn't set up, one of the exchange points on Kingsbury. So they were holding teams at the exchange point there and not letting them go till a certain point. That way everybody had like an even playing field. So it was just really eerie not to get past this whole time. I thought I was going to get past somewhere in Tahoe, but because of the logistics of the race, the first team, like the really, really quick teams, they didn't start catching me until I was leaving Carson City. So that brings me to Carson City. So we made it through Genoa. I'm getting into Carson City around midnight, 1 a.m. And this whole time, and meanwhile, this is night 2. So again, 6 p.m. Thursday, all night, all day on Friday. Now this is like 12 a.m., 1 a.m. on Saturday morning, right? And we're coming into Carson City. And I haven't slept this whole time. My crew really hasn't slept either. I'm really feeling for them. And so I actually was doing pretty good. I wasn't hallucinating too bad. I was hallucinating a little bit, but nothing like out of the ordinary. Like, you know, I'd be running and it's really sandy through that Genoa Valley section. And I would hear like the wind rustle the sand across the road. And my shadow from my headlamp would kind of do some, you know, weird things in the sand, and I would see snakes. So I would jump, and my pacer next to me was like, dude, what are you doing? And I'm like, you don't see those snakes? And he's like, man, you need to sleep, I think. I think you need a nap. And I was like, huh, okay. But I didn't feel tired. I was just kind of delusional. And so what was cool about having a pacer was if I needed something, you know, and we were X miles out from the aid, my pacer could radio in or call into my crew and say, hey, he needs ramen, he needs to sleep, he needs whatever it is, right? So that way we didn't have to address it when I got there. It was already ready for me. And that really helped, I think, set the record, having my stops minimized and really, really streamlined, essentially. So basically, Isaac calls ahead and says he's going to nap, right? He's going to try a nap. And I'm like, you know what? I'm at that point, I was ahead of record pace. So I'm like, why not try to sleep? Worst case scenario, I can't sleep. And I lay there and I relax for 10 minutes. Right. But I'm going to try to sleep. And I was eating a lot of mashed potatoes as a solid food for this one. I was actually doing mashed potatoes, and then I would crunch up potato chips and throw it in the mashed potatoes as like extra carb and like crunch factor. Sometimes it's the little things, man. So I told them, hey, if you could please have that, I'm going to try to smash that, and then I'm going to go in the back of the crew vehicle, and they had a bed all like laid out for me and everything, and I will try a 20-minute nap. So shut the door, set a timer, and then as soon as 20 minutes is up, open that door, basically, and hopefully I will have slept. Who knows? And I eat really quick. I was pretty hungry, which my stomach was working that far into the race. Good sign. And the door closes, and I lay there for about 30 seconds, and I'm thinking, this is stupid. I can't sleep because I'm one of those guys that takes like 20 minutes to fall asleep, like when in a normal life, right? So I'm like, man, I'm going to be falling asleep when they open the door. Like I should be running right now. This is stupid. That thought lasted for about 30 seconds, and then I was out. And before I knew it, I was out for the whole 20 minutes. And then the door opened, and I couldn't believe it. I was like, what happened? And they were like, yeah, you slept. And I felt rejuvenated. Like, I don't know. I think there's something to be said about when your body is so starving for energy and so wrecked, what 20 minutes can do. You know, I've yet to replicate that 20-minute nap. I'm telling you, it worked wonders. The only issue with sleeping, I think, in these races for me personally, and everybody's going to be different, right, was that, like I said, I felt great, felt re-energized. But when I started running again, it just really was hard in the first couple miles to get used to the pains again, because I was continuously running before that with no sleep. So the pain just kind of molded together into this numbness of awful, basically. But when I laid there, that was gone. And then when I started running again, it was, oh man, this is what I was feeling before. And so it took a while just to kind of get used to that suffering and that pain again. But when I did, I just kind of went into a rhythm. And this is, now 2 a.m. and I need to have a goal because this is my second night of running all night. And I'd never done that before. All my 100 milers, you only run one night. So this second night was really testing me. And I told my pacer, I was like, hey, bro, I'm way ahead of record pace. And I think I'm going to try to run this mile. Okay. And can you let me know, I'm going to run a mile straight when we hit the mile. Okay. Cause I'm going to want to walk. And he's like, yeah, for sure. And we start running and I'm just dying. Like, I'm like, this had to be a mile. Like, I'm looking at him, making sure he's checking his watch. I'm like, are you sure you didn't miss the mile, you know? And I ask him, I'm like, how far into this mile are we? And he's like, we're about a quarter mile in of the mile. And I was like, no, it had to be at least 3/4 of a mile. I'm suffering. And so I quickly changed my plan. I was like, instead of running a mile, walking a half mile, I was like, Isaac, bro, let me know when we hit a half mile. And then we're going to walk a quarter mile. And we did that all night. All night long, we did that. We ran a half mile, walked a quarter mile for that second night. Because I was able to run through that first night, I think it banked a lot of time, and this didn't really cost me too much. And it gave me something to focus on. It was almost like a dance, if that makes sense. Run, walk, run, walk. And I won't lie, after, it must have been hundreds of reps of that, if that makes sense. A half mile, quarter mile, half mile, quarter mile, hundreds of reps, right? And there was a few times where Isaac would tell me, like, all right, time to run. Like, we'd be in the quarter mile. And in that quarter mile, I would just want to live there forever. And just, the walking felt so good, right? And he would call me up. He would say, time to run again. And I would just want to say, no, like, it's not time. I don't want to go. I don't want to run. But I never turned him down, and I knew, because if I did, again, I wouldn't be letting myself down. I'd be letting everybody else down too. So we did that all night, man. And that really set a really good pace for coming into the next morning, which the next morning I saw that second sunrise as I was coming up Gold Hill. So it was kind of right before that photo, Gennady, that you showed of me in the pink poles. It was right before that. So I was climbing up VC in the morning, which was nice because it wasn't that hot yet. I was climbing up Saturday morning. And man, when I got to the top of that climb, Isaac was done. So that was it right there. And I was going to pick up my last pacer, which would have been Matt. Well, Matt, and then my mom was on leg 36. But that smile, man, that's really when I realized that this thing was going to happen. Which sounds crazy because, like I said, I was ahead of record pace the whole time. You would think that I would have thought that I had this in the bag, but I just knew that if I could get to Virginia City, this is going to get done. Like, this is it right here. So that's when I really realized, like, we're going to finish this. We're going to finish this thing today. And it was really exciting. And from there, I changed clothes at the Bucket of Blood or whatever it was, I think saloon. So I went to the bathroom there, changed clothes, which my crew was kind of worried about me because I was taking forever. But I was in such pain that, like, I felt like a grandma trying to change clothes. So I was doing it very, very tenderly and slow, And so I leave VC. And then we bombed down, like you mentioned, Old Toll Road, which is a very technical kind of rocky fire road that descends from Virginia City down into Reno. And then it was basically just a grind getting from South Reno back to where the race started at the J Resort. But the whole way from when I got to about Lakeside, which is kind of the downtown area, Reno Running Company has a store there actually. And they have one of their exchange points set up at the store. So everybody kind of knew that I was coming into that exchange point. And I got so much love when I got there. I saw Travis because he happened to be working at the store, my first pacer. So I got to see him. And then that's also where I picked up my final pacer, which was my mom. And she ran leg 36 back into the J Resort with me, along with, a gang of people by the time we got to the end there, which was really cool. I had no idea so many people were following this and so many people wanted to see it get done. So, yeah, I was probably in the most pain of my life in that photo, but nothing was going to, deter me from getting this done. And I definitely had a smile on my face the whole time because it's one of those things where I feel like the reward is definitely in the struggle, not in the prize. I got a medal for this and, it's hanging on my coat rack somewhere and stuff. But the real reward was all the memories, of that whole thing, getting lost. I can laugh about it now, it kind of made me a little anxious in the moment, but and just knowing that with this event, that everybody that was on that team with me create a special bond. Not only me with them, because I mean, they obviously were very close to me to be on the team, right? But seeing them interconnect and kind of just, some of them be strangers and come together for this common goal was really cool, and it was invaluable. And so, yeah, when we finished, it was definitely one of the best moments of my life for sure.
Yes, absolutely. And those memories led you to be able to tell a story like this one, which I think will inspire many more people as well and will stay with them. So, indeed, achieving something like this is not just for the prize or being able to say that one did it, but it is for the experience. And I'm really glad that you persisted after taking that 4 mile detour. Indeed, it's interesting how early on in the race that was, but I think your team had the correct insight that because this is such a long race, you would have plenty of time to essentially make up the time that has been lost. And another very important insight for these kinds of long distances, and this relates to one of the comments in the chat, almost nobody can run all of this continuously without stopping or taking walk breaks. When you're getting to 100+ mile distances, maybe like elite world champions can do that, but almost nobody else, given how much of a toll it takes on the body, can do that without taking some sort of walk break. And what you did during the second night was actually quite strategic in that you allocated dedicated time segments to walking in between running, which meant that on average, your pace was quite good and quite conducive to beating that record. So I really think there are some fascinating insights in the story that you shared. I want to share some of the comments from our viewers. So our friend Rudy Hoffman says, this is emotional to have your mom as your final pacer. And Patricia Hanbury writes, indeed, Fitz is an amazing inspiration. Thank you, Fitz. And Rudy also says, I like how many friends and supporters he clearly has. Well, I think that relates to why ultimately the Reno Running Company allowed you to undertake this feat, and why all the agencies that Matt, the owner of the Reno Running Company, talked to also were supportive. I think they realized the value of the inspiration and how that would draw people, how that would draw those friends and supporters to come out and cheer you on and build up that entire event. Because when people see somebody who is setting his sights so high, setting such an ambitious goal, I think people are naturally drawn to support that. So I am very pleased by the way that Reno Running Company made that decision, because when Juan de Oliva ran the RTO course by himself in 2014, he did it unofficially. So he was essentially told, well, this is not a sanctioned event. So I know you had a conversation with him prior to undertaking your attempt. I am just curious, what did he share with you about his experience, and did he give you any advice?
Yes, it was very interesting. So I have never met Juan before. This meeting initially here. So it was, if anybody's familiar with the racing scene in Reno, we have what's called the Silver State 50/50. It's put on by the Silver State Striders, a local running club here, ultra running club who has rich history in the area. Again, a lot of my very, very good friends and also training partners, very amazing humans. So they put on this half marathon 50-kilometer, 50-mile race that starts at Rancho Park in Reno. So one of my pacers, Isaac, was actually racing the 50-mile race. And he was trying to PR. He's trying to run his fastest time. He's done this race before, and he was trying to PR. Now, this is 1 week before my RTO. So I went out there. I usually volunteer at this race. I like working like the bid pickup and giving people their numbers. Or this time what I ended up doing is I swept the half marathon course, which basically means you're going to run behind the last place person to make sure that they're safe. That's what I did this time. I love being a sweep. So I was out there volunteering, but also my goal was to run up the mountain because I needed one more training run. This is kind of like my last, like it's 1 week before. It wasn't supposed to be a huge run, but running up Peavine is it's moderate. So I did that, and my goal was to run up Peavine because they have an aid station at the summit. And I wanted to meet Isaac there because from the summit, you basically bomb down into Rancho. It's like the last 9 miles of the 50-miler. And I wanted to pace him. I wanted to make sure that he PR'd. I just wanted to run with him. So I went up to that summit aid station. And what I didn't know was that Juan volunteers there every year. So I was up there and I saw a lot of my other friends, right? And one of my buddies was like, hey, you see that guy over there? And he pointed out who happened to be Juan. He was like, hey, that's Juan. That's the only other person that's done what you're about to do. And I was like, well, I should probably like talk to him, and I walked up thinking like my buddy was going to go with me. And I just was walking alone before I knew it. And then I started to talk to him, and you could just tell that everybody was like eyes, like watching this conversation go down. Right. And he's such a humble and really cool dude. Actually, what he said kind of worried me a little bit because I asked him, I was like, kind of like you mentioned, Gennady, do you have any advice? What do you have to tell me? You're the only person that's done this. And he's like, just enjoy it. Have fun. And that's exactly what I needed to hear. But then I asked him, I was like, well, thank you. And what do you think the hardest part for you was? Like, did it ever kind of get dark and did you ever think you weren't going to do it? Or what was the most difficult part? And he thought about it for a second before he gave me an answer. And then this is when he kind of made me nervous. He was like, it wasn't really that bad. It was just fun. And I'm like, man, are you bionic? Like, this is ridiculous. Like, the whole thing was fun. It never was hard, And he was like, no. He was like, I just kind of looked at it like a party. It was a good time. And I'm like, I hope I have that experience too, and to be honest with you, yeah, we got lost. My foot almost fell off and I was running on my ankle. But when I look back at it, would I do it again? And did I have fun? 100%, 110%, And so his advice was really cool because it really, 1 week out too, it took the pressure off. 1 week out, everybody's asking me, are you ready? Are you ready? And I'm like, I want to answer that question intelligently with a proper answer. But man, to my furthest distance before this was 100 miles. I'm about to double it, essentially, almost. I don't know what ready is. If I knew what ready was, I would tell you from ready. And so when he said that, he was basically just saying, you don't have to be ready. There is no ready. Because I kind of mentioned that. I was like, man, Juan, I'm sure, people were asking you, like, are you ready? Like, are you excited? Are you this? Are you that? How do you feel? And I told him, I was like, what is ready? Like, what is ready to take on this kind of endeavor? And he's like, there is no ready. There is no ready. You just do it. And that's exactly what I needed to hear, which was like really amazing. And that's exactly, how we set off on that first leg on the start line. I was like, hey, right now things are going good and I'm going to run the mile I'm in. And that's all I'm going to think about. I'm not going to think about what happens after 100 miles or 150 miles. That's not a problem that's here right now. And I'm creating problems before they even happen, which makes no sense. And I realized too, when I started to do that, it made everything worse. Like I would do that, mile 70, mile 80. I would think, man, I'm almost coming up on 100 miles, but that's nothing. I had to run 80 more after that. You know what I mean? And as soon as I had those thoughts, the pains were worse. The heat was hotter, the cramps were unbearable, right? But then when I just focus on the fact that, hey, I'm still running, and nothing's really that bad. Like the check engine light is not on. Like nothing is is saying stop right now, And when I would think about that and just kind of being present in the moment and cracking jokes with my pacer, and just kind of running the mile I was in, it made everything easier. And if I realized if I could just do that for the whole time, that we'd make it back to Reno. And we did. So having Juan, like you said, just really take a lot of the pressure off and remind me that it was supposed to be fun, right? Like I might have a goal and I might, and I should be ambitious, because why not me? I think a lot more people need to have that mentality. Like, why not me? You know what I mean? Yeah, it's been done once before. It's double the longest distance I've ever done, but why not? And he really kind of lit that fire. So I'm really thankful for him. So if you're watching, or if you do watch this one, thank you for the advice you gave me the week before, because it really was invaluable. So.
Indeed. And our friend Mike Lazine writes, mind over body is a real thing. And it seems that what Juan told you essentially helped you to keep the present moment in focus and try to enjoy what you could. I think implicit in what he said was also a recognition that there will be hard parts to it no matter what you do, and you can't hyper optimize for just a completely pain-free experience during that kind of race. So he was essentially saying, enjoy it, try to enjoy it when you can. And it's interesting, you suggested that he might be superhuman. I was wondering that too when I met him, because when I first met him, this was in 2018, and I was part of an informal group run in Death Valley. This was in January in Death Valley, so it is not oppressively hot there. It's about 65 degrees, which is quite pleasant for running. But don't go to Death Valley in July. That is what I will tell our audience. In January, it's fine. So I ran about 24 miles with the group, and Juan was part of the group, except I had learned upon talking with Juan that on the previous day, he had climbed Telescope Peak, which is the highest point in Death Valley. And our run took us to the Badwater Basin, which is the lowest point, not just in Death Valley, but the continental United States. So it's astonishing that on 2 consecutive days, he would climb the highest mountain and then go to the lowest point in Death Valley. But he seemed very unperturbed by that. He seemed to just take that as a matter of course, that yes, he did such a thing. And it's interesting too that in 2014, when he completed the RTO unsupported, which means he didn't get essentially official pacers, he didn't get official support at the aid stations. Maybe somebody gave him food along the way, but he didn't get his result recognized as part of the race results for that year. He didn't get a medal, but he did it anyway. And it seemed like he felt that he had fun along the way. So that is a remarkable kind of character to have, to be able to enjoy that experience despite the adversity. So we've got many more comments for you now. Kevin Bransaforti writes, such impressive athletic achievements. And Rudy Hoffman writes, wow, that certainly makes me reevaluate what humans are capable of. Astounding. And more life, please. Our friend John H. writes, 182 miles. Pheidippides would have dropped in his tracks. So Pheidippides is the legendary Greek original marathon runner. So after the Battle of Marathon, when the Greeks defeated the Persians, he was supposed to run to Athens and essentially say, we won. And he did, according to the legend, once he ran that original marathon, which, by the way, wasn't 26.2 miles. It was 26 miles. The 0.2 miles were added later on because essentially Queen Victoria wanted to have the race end at Buckingham Palace. But he ran 26 miles, and according to the legend, he died. Now, we don't know if he really died. We also know that he probably ran that distance in armor. But Fitz, you are a coach. So you clearly know how to run longer distances than Pheidippides. What advice would you give him, if you could, to complete a marathon and not die? And I think perhaps many of our viewers would be interested in that kind of advice as well.
I would tell him, or anybody that would want to do a marathon, to start asleep, which is a phrase I kind of tell myself. Start slow, and if you start a race like that, like a marathon or anything upwards of a half marathon, and you have the question in the beginning, hey, am I going slow enough? Just the fact that you have that question probably proves you're not going slow enough. So I would definitely even slow down more. So start slow, drink before you're thirsty, and intake calories before you're hungry, because if you're thirsty or hungry, that's usually a sign that you missed your window. And to have fun. So that's kind of the most important thing.
Yes, indeed. Well, if Pheidippides had your advice in the 5th century BC, well, maybe we could have had more reliable evidence that he survived the first marathon. Now, speaking of nutrition, some of our viewers have been wondering in terms of your food intake during the RTO, but also if you could speak to nutrition more generally, because you are a vegan runner, and you're not the only one, but you are a vegan runner who has achieved these impressive distances. And to a lot of people, that may be counterintuitive, but how do you do it? What areas of nutrition do you focus on, and how do you satisfy all of the needs for all of the nutrients that a runner would need?
So yes, correct. I've been plant-based for roughly 7 years. Really, a lot of my diet, I try to keep to whole foods, like, legumes, lentils, tofu, tempeh, all that kind of stuff as far as protein goes. Now, yeah, I usually try to just get my, my recommended intake, which I try to keep around like 1.5 to 2 grams per kilogram of body weight, just depending on kind of where I am. And then from there, I focus on just eating carbs to fuel. And the fats, usually trace amounts of fats are in almost everything. So I don't really worry about getting fat sources, maybe a healthy avocado here or there, something like that. But that's kind of how I prioritize my way of eating, essentially. Now when I'm getting to more of a race prep, then the carbohydrates will come up more. In terms of like a percentage of my diet, I would say that carbohydrates usually fall in the 60 to 70% range, give or take. Usually when I'm training, which I'm either training for a training race or I'm training for an A race. So I'm usually doing a lot of carbohydrates. But that's kind of my diet usually, generally. The only thing that really changes race week that I've found that works better for me is the old, carb loading theory. I believe that it's definitely not a myth. Like, carbohydrates are king. They're gonna, store a lot of, energy into the muscles. They're gonna give you a lot of energy when you go to run. But the issue I did was when I was cycling, I would just sit down the night before race to like a full-on pizza, or like 2 pounds of pasta. And what I realized what would happen to me was I would feel the energy in the race, but I would feel it so late in the game. I would almost always have a terrible start. Like, I would feel sluggish. And then later on, I would kind of find my legs. And I really believe that was because I was still digesting a lot of the carbs I almost overloaded what I could digest at one time, was what I was believing. And so I kind of looked into it. I did some more research, and a lot more coaches are now saying that you definitely need a carb load, but you should start with a moderate amount, and you should do it not one day before the race, but you should start it days out. So if my plate was, just as an example, right, it was generally rice, broccoli, and tofu, right? Carbs, some vegetable, and then for protein, what I would usually do that week was I would kind of remove the broccoli and I would just double the rice. And I would do that for pretty much every meal that week. That way I wasn't like overloading myself all at once, but I was definitely getting in those carbohydrates throughout the week, and also limiting my fiber. I realized that the week of a race, if I can limit the roughage, just the bulk that's in my system, I start better. I have more energy throughout. So that's another kind of trick and again, everybody's different. Everybody's system, responds better or worse to certain aspects of diet. But for me, I realized that, yes, cutting out the fiber, limiting the roughage, and then upping my carbohydrate intake, but in segments, not in one day, was really key for me. And during the race, I was basically taking, to be honest, the old-fashioned Gatorade. And then I was using Element for my other electrolyte, which is a powder substance that I mix in the water. It has about 500 milligrams of sodium, potassium, magnesium. So between those two, they were my hydration sources. The Gatorade, even though it has sugar in it, I wasn't relying on for my carbs. That was just like a top off, because I needed kind of continuous calories, right? So I was just using the Gatorade, even though it had sugar in it, as an electrolyte source. And then for my carbohydrate sources, I'm endorsed by this company called Precision. They're a gel company, and I was basically doing their gels. They're these like 30 to 90 gram gelatinous sugar packets, if I had to explain them to non-runners. I was doing those upwards of trying to get in 60 grams of carbs from the gels per hour for the 40 hours. Meanwhile, when I saw my crew, I was also mixing in solid food. Now, for a 50-kilometer race or a 50-mile race, if I'm trying to podium, or I'm trying to get like top 3, or I'm really trying to race it, what I'll do is I'll just gel my way through that whole thing, because gels make you run faster. They're more efficient. You're not fiddling with wrappers and all this other stuff, right? You don't have to chew, right? You can just swallow carbs direct into the system, and you're good to go. Now, anything over 6 to 7 hours, though, it really becomes hard to just gel your way through, because in terms of a 40-hour race, you're going to have some muscle breakdown, and getting in some protein, now not a lot, but a little bit during that 45 hours is going to be pretty vital. So what I would do was, when I saw my crew, I would also eat things like the mashed potatoes I mentioned, right? Peanut butter pretzels. I really have this really good vegan ramen that I like. It's like a couple noodle style ramen, has like 12 grams of protein, like per little cup. And again, that's not a lot of protein, but just kind of introducing little hits of protein here and there were definitely helping. Also, it was very, very good for me on my GI to have a little bit of savory mixed in with all that sugar, because too much sugar really wreaks havoc on at least my gastro system. So having the savory and the salt to kind of like slow down all that sugar really, I think, made my calories last a lot longer too, which felt really good. I will say, for this whole race, I've had stomach issues, bad stomach issues in other races, 100-mile races. I've had them in short races, like 25K races, right? I have, whatever protocol we did for the Reno-Tahoe Odyssey, I'm definitely going to take notes. I'm going to save it for my back pocket, because I cannot believe stomach was cooperating that whole 45 hours. I was very, very surprised that's not a problem I had. Got lost, foot almost fell off, but the stomach was golden the whole time, which was really good.
Yes, that's amazing. So for runners, often the digestive issues, especially over long distances, are what slow them down. And indeed, if one doesn't have any digestive issues over a longer race, one could be faster, sometimes by several hours. So the fact that you were able to avoid those, I think, was remarkable, and surely contributed to your ability to set the course record. Now, Mike Lazine writes, yummy avocado, so he likes that part of your diet. Rudy Hoffman writes, I think this is more general regarding to the advice you would give Pheidippides. Good advice. I will use this in my legendary fast walk around the big block. And he also says, vegan runner, how cool is that? He wonders if you take any sort of protein powder or whether you just get your protein from the various vegan dishes that do have some protein engineered into them.
Very good question. I try to keep my protein sources to, like I said, the whole foods. However, I do like protein bars over the powder. There's no real reason for it. It's just a personal preference for me. I feel like I'm eating a candy bar. It's a good treat that I can have. I love what's called the Builder's bars. They're made by Cliff, like Cliff Bar. They also have the oat bars, you know, that a lot of people are familiar with for hiking and like running and cycling. But they make a 20-gram protein bar. White fudge Oreo. It's one of the best ones you can get. Very, very yummy. And so I like that. Protein powder, though, I'll supplement with it sometimes. The one I have gotten before is Planta, so Planta. I get it from the vitamin shop, and I like it because it's not it's actually a soy-free blend too. So it's just a blend of like different vegetables and pea protein and legume protein. Again, they also have a lot of different flavors, which makes it fun for me. They have like a birthday cake, a French toast. So yeah, Planta is one of my favorites. Very malleable because I'm not a shake guy. So when I'm usually doing my protein powder, I'm making fun stuff like protein oatmeal. So I'll mix the protein powder into oats, and it's like gets this like pudding kind of thing going, and it feels like dessert. Or I'm making like protein ice cream, which is another really cool thing you can do with protein powder. But if you have to really have a good powder that's malleable, because otherwise it's like chalky. So the Planta stuff is really good.
Yes, thank you for that. And Mike Lazine also wonders about your intake of potassium, especially to help reduce cramps. You mentioned that you ate a lot of mashed potatoes and potato chips. Was that with the intention of keeping your potassium levels up so that cramping would be minimized? Because cramping is a real risk over such long distances. And I have even found that's my greatest vulnerability when I exceed 20 miles. So in a marathon or 50K race, I've often had to battle these kinds of cramps, but maybe potassium can help prevent that. In your experience, has adding potatoes in your diet help with that? Have any other foods help with that?
Yes, no, that's spot on. Bananas, potatoes, all that kind of stuff into my diet definitely helps. I'm a firm believer in the fact, like you said, Gennady, potassium helps reduce cramps. I think a lot of people, when they look at, I would urge them, whatever they're using as far as like an electrolyte source. And you don't have to be like an athlete, so to speak, to use electrolytes, right? Like you want to be hydrated, even if you're just a normal 9 to 5, person, right? So whatever you're drinking, if it's plain water, first off, I would definitely get some sort of electrolyte in, maybe like once a day. Again, even if you're not like a workout enthusiast. And if you already have an electrolyte source, like I said, I use Element. But you can use a lot of different ones. There's so many different brands. It's not, Element's not the end all be all, but I would urge you, like, no matter what you're using, if it's liquid IV, if it's a Gatorade substance or whatever it is, look at those, like you were saying, Gennady, big three, look at this sodium, potassium, and the magnesium, and make sure that whatever electrolyte that you're using has all three. In various amounts. If it just has sodium, you're really missing out, and you're probably leaving a lot on the table. So usually those are the ones I recommend to my athletes, are the sodium, magnesium, and potassium. Again, so many different brands make electrolytes. Find one that works for you, one that tastes good to you, and hope that helps.
Yes, that's great advice, and thank you very much, Fitz. Now, Art Ramon writes, I need to buy some gels as backup for my hikes. Those bars get hard. And yes, the gels are quite convenient when running. One could even consume them while one runs. So one doesn't really need to stop because there's nothing to chew. And that's why many runners use them. I would use them for half marathon races or longer. That's when it becomes important to replenish one's calories because one depletes them quite rapidly. For, say, a 5K or a 10K race, I don't really need them because I still have whatever energy was stored up from breakfast, and I always eat breakfast before a race, but the gels are quite useful for longer distances. Now, Art Ramon, do you have any follow-up questions for Fitz, either on the gels or on something else?
Probably on water consumption. When I used to be able to trail run, I used to go into Bear Canyon and do about 4 miles in with a few stream crossings, but I had to carry my water, and I usually carried about 2 liters. But in that 4 mile distance, I do about 1,200 feet of elevation gain, and I would burn through that entire liter just getting there, and then I'd have the liter to get back out. So how much water do you burn through? And when you're sort of on the trail side of things, how much do you carry with you?
That's a very good question, actually. To what you said, Art Ramon, it really does depend, kind of like you were saying, where I'm running. If that 4 miles has a mountain like yours does, 1,200 plus feet of elevation gain, I'm definitely going to go through and carry a lot more water than if it was a flat 4 mile run, because that's simply just going to take me longer time. And that's what I'm usually thinking about, is like how long I'm going to be out there. Again, if it's hot too, that plays a fact. Like I can just, my little like house run around my house is usually like a 10K to 10 miles in the fall to winter. I don't take anything with me, and I'm usually okay. As soon as the heat comes up over 80 degrees with the altitude up here, I'm definitely taking a bottle for that same exact run. So definitely the conditions come into play. Funny enough that you asked, though, I think a lot of people will be very curious to learn about sweat tests if you don't already know about them. So I did a race about 3 weeks after the RTO called the Broken Arrow Sky Race. It's a huge event that's put on here in Tahoe area, Palisades, which is Old Squaw Valley. It's a ski resort. And they do a race there, but also as part of that race, they have a big expo. So all these vendors, from gel companies to shoe companies to everything, they show up and they try to, they're bringing out their new product. They're, telling people about what's going on with their company. And Never Second is another gel company. So kind of like Precision, but just different. Okay. And they were doing free sweat tests at this race. So I was already there. I'd already, done my race and everything. So I thought, hey, why not sign up? They were doing like these online signups. So I signed up, and what it's designed to do is it's supposed to tell you, because everybody's body is designed differently, like your sweat rate is designed differently. Some people sweat a lot. Some people sweat a little bit. Some people are salty sweaters. Some people don't lose that much sodium in their sweat. So there's so many different variables as to how people sweat, and that will dictate how much electrolyte and how much water you actually need, because everybody's going to be different. And what they do is they put a sensor on you, like a sensor on your skin, and they have you do, I want to say it's 30 minutes of moderate to moderately intense exercise. Now, they could put that sensor on you and say, hey, go for a run, come back and we'll analyze the data. They could put that sensor on you and put you on a training bike, which is actually what they did to me. So they put the sensor on me and I sat on a stationary bike, and I basically just spun for 30 minutes, and I was sweating, pretty good, obviously. And when I was done, they took that sensor off, they analyzed the data, and they said, okay, you need 36 ounces of water an hour with, God, I want to say it was like 1,500 milligrams of sodium an hour, which was insane, crazy. I was taking about 500 to 600 an hour milligrams of sodium. So almost half of what I really needed. So really cool to have this new information. Again, I just got it like a month ago. So what I'm going to do with this in my process of training is I'm going to try to implement those numbers in my training. Now, what's going to happen, I would guess, is I haven't experimented with it yet because I haven't really been training so much since the race. But what I would guess is in taking that much fluid, because I'm not used to it, and that much electrolyte, it will be hard to run my same pace with doing that. So what'll probably happen is I'll need to train the protocol and slow down my paces to get used to taking in all this electrolyte and this fluid. Hopefully, though, by doing that and hitting those correct numbers, I will optimize my body and I'll be faster in the long run, if that makes sense. So the sweat tests are really cool. You can order them online. You can do them at home. So you don't have to go to a facility. But yeah, something to look into if you're curious about, like, especially runners or people who are looking into getting into running or cycling or anything like that. If you're curious about like how much electrolyte or how much water you need, really cool to almost take some of the guesswork out of it for sure.
And what's your current body weight? What's your height and weight? What's like the most efficient for ultra marathon running?
I actually put on a little bit of weight when I was coming up to do the RTO, just because I knew that inevitably there was going to come a time in that 45 hours where I simply couldn't replenish the calories that were just being exerted. So I purposely put on a little bit of weight. I usually hover anywhere from 155 to 165 pounds, and I'm about 5'9".
Okay. All right, cool. Thank you.
Yes, I think that's a really good weight range for effective endurance running over long distances. Now, it's interesting too, John H., more life please, notes we need balanced electrolytes, sodium, potassium, magnesium. So we need all of them when we run, and having a deficit in any of them could lead to cramps and other issues. Daniel Tweet wonders, do any fitness watches come with a sweat chemistry sensor? I suspect the sweat tests are a bit too new for that, but Fitz, if you're aware of any, let us know.
No, that's a very good question. I would agree with you, Gennady. Not that I know of right now, but that's a very good question, actually. And I would venture to guess that in the future, not so very far future, that's probably going to be coming down the pipeline for sure.
Yes, indeed. Hopefully such watches will come down the pipeline. It would also be great to have a convenient blood pressure measuring watch. And for athletes, that may be useful because what we're used to getting measured, say, in the doctor's office is resting blood pressure. But the blood pressure, even for someone without health issues, is of course much higher when one is engaged in physical activity. So it would be good to track that, say, over the course of a run or even over the course of a typical day, to try to understand patterns, to try to understand what is normal, not just at rest, but when one is exerting oneself. So more comments on Pheidippides, interestingly enough. So more life please writes, hey, more about Pheidippides. Before he did his sprint from Marathon to Athens, he'd previously run 150 miles from Athens to Sparta to seek Sparta's support against the Persians who outnumbered them. So that's interesting. Pheidippides did have that experience of much longer distances. And when the Spartans said no way because they were in the middle of a religious festival, Pheidippides ran back that 150 miles with bad news. So somehow he survived that, which is why, by the way, the whole legend about him dying after running from Marathon to Athens may be greatly exaggerated, as Mark Twain would put it, because if he could do 150 miles and then run 150 miles back, 26 miles probably wouldn't have killed him. But of course, there are other factors, like one could still have cardiac arrest, and I don't know what his state of cardiac health was. But interestingly enough, Kevin Bransaforti writes, I like how Gennady is always trying to work out the survival strategies, even for people who are already dead. So comprehensive. Well, we try. We try here to consider alternate possibilities where life can be preserved and continued. So I wanted to ask you more about sleep, because you mentioned that 20 minutes of sleep were quite rejuvenating for you, even though objectively 20 minutes is not a lot. But what effects did you generally notice of sleep deprivation as you were running? And after the 20 minutes of sleep, did you find that you continue to have some of those effects of sleep deprivation or not so much? And more generally, what role does sleep play in your running preparations? Do you consistently get a certain amount of sleep, or are you one of those runners who are able to more regularly function on lower amounts of sleep?
Yeah, very good question. So for me, I'm usually pretty good with not sleeping. Even during 100-mile races, all these races have what's called a cutoff, a maximum time allowed for you to finish these races. Now, most of the 100-milers are pretty generous. They'll give you upwards of 36, 40 hours, some of them, right? And I know a lot of my training partners, a lot of my friends that race 100-milers, and they like to sleep just in a 100-mile race. Like they simply, it's hard for them, it's difficult for them to run all night without sleeping, even one night. And some people won't even make it to the aid station. They'll do what's called a dirt nap. So you'll be running along the trail and you'll just see some sorry soul just literally on a rock somewhere just pass out because he simply couldn't make it all the way to the aid station. And in that event, you know, try to not disturb them, usually let them be as long as they look like they're, in an okay way, right? They're not in the middle of the trail. But yeah, so a lot of people sleep just in hundreds. I've never had to sleep in any of my ultras. So this 20-minute nap was technically the first time I've ever slept in a race at all, which kind of made it feel pretty foreign to me. Now, I would do it all over again. I stand by that 20-minute nap 100%. What I will say, though, is in my training, I didn't do it for the whole, 4 months of prep, but I would say for about 2 months of it, I purposefully trained my body at sleep deprivation. What I would do is I'd wake up at like 3 a.m. I would go on about a 10-mile run, and then I have work, right? So I would do like my work day, which is 10 hours from 7 to 5. And then I would go to the gym and I would train clients after that. So my day wasn't really getting done till like 9. I was probably getting like 6 hours of sleep. I was doing that really just to train that sleep deprivation and get used to running when my brain wasn't really, operating. And I believe it really helped because, again, other than a couple of hallucinations and, and kind of just like delirium. Like I was laughing at almost nothing. You know what I mean? Everything was just silly to me because I was so tired. But other than that, I really didn't have too many signs of sleep deprivation. Like the pains weren't all that worse. I didn't get dizzy. I didn't have headaches, which also helped a lot too. So I don't know. And I feel for people, right, that sleep is an issue for, because kind of like the nutrition thing, I believe that if your gut isn't in check, like you said, Gennady, it makes a lot of these races a lot more difficult, if not impossible, or it just makes them take a lot longer. Right. When you can't get calories in, you simply have to slow down. So it can make a, 45-hour race take 50 hours. And then same thing with the sleep, right? If you show up to a race tired, or, you're operating a race like not to your full potential, then that's simply going to take longer. Right. So I definitely feel for people that need to sleep, but it's definitely something I didn't have an issue with. And I'm very thankful for.
Yes, it's very fortunate that you were able to complete the 182 miles on 20 minutes of sleep. And yes, it's not always a pleasant experience to do that on that little sleep, but I think for most people, they would need at least a few hours in between. That's my general impression. Now, I also see a lot of our viewers wondering about the distinction between road and trail running. So Rudy Hoffman writes, so some of this is on off-road trails. That is remarkable. What if you trip or twist your ankle? And then Mike Lazine wonders, what is worse, running on pavement or on hard dirt roads? So trail running is a sport, and there are many races that are held exclusively on off-road trails. There are some that are hybrid road trail races, and many road races. If I were to make a generalization, most road races are shorter than most trail races. Road races most often go up to a marathon, though a runner whom I know who is now in his early 80s, I think he's 82, Frank Bozanich, he used to be a champion of the road 50 milers and road 100 milers back when those were in vogue in the 1970s and the 1980s. So longer road race distances did exist, but at this stage in the running sport, most races longer than a marathon are trail races. Now, Fitz, I would be interested in your thoughts about the trade-off between road and trail running, because the way I see the trade-off is with road running, the pavement is smoother, you can go faster, but there is more impact. And if you are in an area where there are cars, you have to watch out for the cars. So that's a hazard. For trail running, the surfaces are softer, but you have more tripping hazards, many more tripping hazards, rocks, roots, uneven terrain. I generally fall about twice per year on average on the trails. I almost never fall on the roads. Well, maybe I've fallen twice on the roads. But with trail running, the falling hazard is greater, but a lot of runners who do the ultra distances swear by the trail running as being able to preserve their joints and their knees for a longer period of time, and they can go longer on the trails. But what is your perspective as to what those trade-offs are? Do you have a preference as to one versus the other? And for longevity in running, if one wants to be doing this many decades hence, which terrain is better?
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head there, Gennady. I just believe it's a different hard. I don't know that one is more difficult than the other, but it's a different hard. Like you were saying with the trail, it's going to slow you down simply because some trails are technical, some trails are rocky, and that terrain is definitely going to slow you down. Now, the dirt is going to be far less impactful, though, on your ligaments, your joints. When you speak to longevity, the trail is going to help preserve your body over time versus the pavement now, which is a lot more unforgiving on those joints and those ligaments. It damages them, degrades them a lot more. But with the pavement, especially for a race like this, where, my brain was kind of turned off during the last, I would say 50 miles, having the pavement was really cool because it allowed me to have sloppy feet. Like, I mean, little things start to happen after 150, 160 miles. Like it becomes hard to pick up your feet as high. You kind of just have this like ultra shuffle is what I would call it. So not having to worry about, as you mentioned, those tripping hazards was very, very beneficial when I was super fatigued and super tired. And I had what I was saying, that sloppy feet kind of action going on there. Now in my training though, like I mentioned before, I did make sure to do my training for this race almost exclusively on road, because again, it was maybe 20% trail. Most of it was road. And since we just kind of mentioned that the road is a lot more, unforgiving on the joints, I wanted to make sure that I trained my body up to be durable. I didn't really think it was going to be speed that got the record for this. I believed that the stronger I was, the more durable I was, that was going to help me in the long run. And the only way I knew how to make sure that would happen was to train for the specific terrain my race was in, which was pavement. So I was just thrashing myself on the pavement. I mean, some of these like 70, 80 mile weeks, I would get done and I'd be going into work like walking sideways, just the training. And, everybody's joking with the RTO. Like as it was coming up, everybody's like, dude, you're going to run that whole thing? Like that could kill a man. Like, are you scared? Like, what if you don't make it? And I'm like, dude, what you don't realize is if this training doesn't kill me, nothing will kill me. Like the training was exponentially harder than the task at hand. So when people would say, oh my God, you're going to die out there, I'd be like, bro, if this doesn't kill me, there's no way that can, And so yeah, the training really helped. I didn't really feel, to be honest with you, the effects of the pavement until we got back into Reno. So after we descended from Geiger Grade and we kind of went on that flat, like South Reno section, I really realized then that, yeah, man, my knees had taken a beating, and it became very, very hard to run then. But again, I was only like 4 legs from the finish. I'd much rather have that happen, at leg 32 than leg 22. So definitely think the training helped, and I would urge anybody, no matter what their race is, whether it's trail, pavement, if it has a lot of climbing, train in the mountains. If it's downhill, train the downhill, because that's a different animal too. So I feel like if you just train, for the adaptation of your race, that really helps. I'm a strength coach. And a lot of runners, I should say, when they go to lift, they're doing like high volume, high rep, very, very fast, intense reps, right? And they're trying to replicate the repetitions of running. Whereas I believe strength training, what you need to do is give yourself what running can't give you, and that's the durability and that's the strength. If you're trying to train for a specific facet of running, I believe that's done in the running itself. I.e., if you're training for a mountain race, train in the mountains. If you're training for a Berlin Marathon, maybe implement some track days to help you out, but yeah, hope that helps.
Yes, thank you. It's good advice to train for the kind of race that one is going to run, and make sure that one has experience with the terrain, with the texture, with the kinds of situations one would encounter along the way. Now, Rudy Hoffman wonders, with the pavement training, how do you keep your ankles and knees from being damaged? At least I think he means in the longer term. In the shorter term, you would have some recovery that you would need to do. And Mike Lazine also writes along these lines, I would assume Mike's body has gotten tougher with continuous running. His body has probably gotten more hardened, like when people train for the summer games. So would you say there is some validity to Mike Lazine's observations that this training hardens you to be able to resist some of that impact to a greater extent?
First off, thank you for the kind words. And I totally agree. I believe every race you train for sets you up for success for that next one, And I would even argue that it's not just the training that sets you up for the next race, but possibly the last race you did itself. We show up to a marathon, we show up to a race, whatever it is, and we put a number on our bodies, and that makes it a race to our minds. But our body just views it as a hard thing we did, a workout, really. That's why I try to remind my athletes of, when I did the RTO in June 1st, last day of May, right? 3 weeks later, I did Broken Arrow, and the recovery on that was pretty rough. It took me almost all those 3 weeks to recover. But, since Broken Arrow, I've done, 2 other races that I wasn't really planning on doing. But, I have to think that what I did with the RTO, kind of like you said, hardened my body, made it ready for the next one and the next one. One of my old coaches had a saying, and it was, do the hard things and the hard things come easy. And I know that sounds simple, but everything I've ever done is definitely proven that true. So yeah, it's interesting because, yeah, like I said, you have a number on and that makes it a race, but I believe our bodies, right, really just view that as the next workout, right? The next hard thing we did. And then that makes, the next difficult thing we do less hard, if that makes sense.
Yes, the body becomes habituated to that kind of exertion. And that's why a lot of non-runners, for instance, might not understand how somebody could run 10 kilometers a day, which is what I do on most days. But the body does get accustomed to it to the point where that's seen as normal. Now, I don't know if running 100 miles can ever come to be seen as normal, though maybe running a few 100-mile races per year could be seen as normal by someone like Dr. Bill Andrews, who is now, he's going to be 75 this year, so he's 74 now, and he has run hundreds of those distances. He has been a previous guest of ours on several salons, and for him, it's a way of life, essentially. So there are some people who could adapt not to doing that every day, but having that be a persistent presence in their lives. Now, Mike Lazine does write that Mike would make an awesome Green Lantern because you need serious willpower to do what Mike does. So, what would you say about the role of willpower? What would you say about situations where, yes, you're not feeling your best, but you feel like maybe you could keep going, but maybe you don't want to keep going necessarily? Where does that, let's say, strength of character come from to say, even if you're really not feeling well, you believe you can persevere not just for the next mile, but for tens of miles potentially. And then you would need to have a certain confidence that, yes, you can make it even if you're not feeling well. Does it come from your training, or does it come from something else, some other place within your mind?
That's good. For me, I think it brings back to what I just said, right? Do the hard things and the hard things come easy. So kind of like what you mentioned, Gennady, I believe it does come from some of my training. But also just kind of going back to my childhood, I never, like we mentioned, I didn't start running till I was 22 or in 2022. And when I was growing up, I was actually just super overweight. I despised any form of exercise. I wouldn't even participate in PE, let alone any curricular activities. And so when I graduated and I moved out on my own, that's really when I kind of lost track of my health, and I was upwards of about 320 pounds. In my earlier 20s, I was morbidly obese, and I had my daughter in 2015. So long before my journey to running, I had her, and there's photos of me in the delivery room still, upwards of 300 pounds holding her. And that really set like lit a fire in me to start to lead by example, because it was the first time in my life where I was a part of something bigger than myself. And I knew that, I had to change not only for me, but for her. Right. And so now fast forward all these years later, and when we bring up willpower and what does it take to continue, right? Like, I mean, the RTO, I'm not gonna lie, was really fun, and kind of like Juan said, it felt like a big party. But I've had other races where I didn't think I was going to make it. I really wanted to quit. Like my mind was saying stop running, my body was saying stop running, but the spirit just wouldn't stop. Like it wanted to keep going. And I really think for me, it's one of those things where I spent so long feeling like I was just like living in a shell of myself. And I wanted to do so much that I couldn't do because I was overweight. And now all these years later, having the opportunity and having a vessel, right, a body that allows me to do those things, I mean, it's almost like it's impossible for me to quit, because I'm kind of, making up for lost time. I'm doing all these things now that I couldn't do before. And I think that's another reason too why I like helping so many other people achieve goals too, because man, this not even that long ago, all these things seemed impossible to me. Like if you would have told 2015, 2014 me that we'd be here talking about this right now, I would have laughed you out of the room, and I would have went to get a little Caesar's pizza. And it's just crazy what you can do if you really tell yourself that you can do it, if you set your mind to it, and this record, again, I wanted it really bad. I wanted it so bad, man. I dreamed about it. Like that moment when I finished and I crossed the line and I was hugging my mom. I mean, I felt like I'd already lived it 10 times over. Right. And so I just think it's a testament to just everybody, right? If you want it bad enough and you're willing to sacrifice and work hard enough, then you can do it. You can do pretty much anything, And so really, all these races I do and everything I finish, the willpower comes from me telling former 300-pound self, we did it, man. Like we we made it, and we're doing it, and we're going to keep doing it for as long as we can,
Yes, thank you very much for that. And I think I can see where some of that willpower is coming from because of the extreme transformative journey that you took to get to the point of fitness where you could even attempt these kinds of distances. You've seen how far you've come, and now with that ability that you've gained, you realized, oh, I can do all of these amazing feats. And even though those are still hard, in a certain sense, they're not as hard as what you have already gone through. It's similar to how people who rise from humble beginnings, sometimes into the upper middle class or even into being independently wealthy, they might not see certain kinds of achievements as being impossible because they've already made a journey that was more difficult in certain respects. Because I think it's more difficult to go from being poor to being middle class than it is from being middle class to being wealthy. And those people have that sense of perspective, and you have that sense of perspective when it comes to your fitness journey. But I really think achieving great things, achieving these kinds of positive transformations in one's life as a whole, can be a motivator for further accomplishments. And that is one way in which you are inspiring. That is one lesson that I want the audience of this salon to take away from this, that these kinds of transformations are possible. Now, our friend Daniel Tweed has a question about you, more about your beginnings. He wonders, are you a Nevada native? Or if not, where is your birthplace?
So I'm actually from the East Coast, born in Pennsylvania, a small town called Bradford. I try to go back every year. Actually, most of my family is back in Pennsylvania in the East Coast. Very small town, and yeah, great place to grow up. Really, really great place to grow up. I remember picking corn and just run around on the farm as a kid. And yeah, so from there, moved out here in 2009 and graduated from Spanish Springs in 2012.
Yes, thank you very much for that. And we have another comment about you from Ashley Poe, 1994. Truly an inspiration. I've seen Mike through many phases of his life, what he has achieved and how far he has come. He is such a true inspiration. So thank you to Ashley for that comment. And then Daniel Tweed writes, from amazing feet come amazing feats. So Daniel has this ability to engage in some interesting plays on words, and this is one example of that. Now, in terms of supplementation, we have some questions about that. Do you take any supplements? More Life Please mentions creatine and taurine, but really anything that you believe assists you as a runner, or do you prefer to get all of your essential substances that you need through food?
Yeah, very good question. I don't take those specific supplements, and kind of to your credit, Gennady, I try to get most of my vitamins through food. I take two supplements though that I will mention. One is a basic multivitamin, just to cover my bases. In a perfect day, I eat my pint of berries and I get my green leafy vegetables and I get my antioxidants through my food, but every day is not perfect. So just to make sure I'm covering my bases and to prevent from getting ill, I take a multi, just something simple. And then the other one I supplement with is B12, simply because I don't eat meat, being a vegan, and it's really rich in red meat, which I don't get in my diet. So I take a B12 supplement on top of that. But other than that, it's pretty much that, just a lot of food.
Yes, indeed. And B12 supplementation is quite essential for vegans. Indeed, a lot of vegan foods actually have vitamin B12 built in. So, for instance, the Impossible Burgers or the Beyond Burgers, they might actually have more B12 in them than a burger made of cow meat, because the B12 is engineered into them, since the creators know that vegans often might not get enough of it through other sources. We also have a question from More Life Please about what footwear you were using during the RTO, and in general, what are your preferences for footwear when running?
Great question. I use a company called Mount to Coast. It's a newer shoe company. They have a road shoe. They have a hybrid shoe, which is more for road slash a moderately technical trail. And then they have a trail specific shoe that has thicker lugs, meant for rocky, chunky kind of terrain. So for this race, because it was about 80% road and 20% trail, I started in the hybrid shoe, because even the trail portion in this race is not that technical. I didn't need the trail specific shoe. I mainly used the hybrid shoe for the trail sections. However, I didn't want to swap so many times in one race, because that would cost me a lot of time. So I wanted to start in the hybrid shoe because I had that leg 4 climb up Dog Valley. So I started in the hybrid shoe and I wore that for the first few legs. And then for the middle part of the race, I switched to their road shoe and I ran in that for the majority of the race, switching back to the hybrid shoe when I went up to Virginia City, because again, I knew I had that really technical descent down out of Virginia City. So I kind of sandwiched the road shoe in the middle. I started and ended with the hybrid shoe from Mount to Coast. Really love those shoes. Most Nike, Adidas, any brand that you might be familiar with, a lot of those shoes are rated for a certain amount of mileage, mainly because the foam in them degrades. Even if your shoe to the naked eye looks good and you take care of it, it's clean, the foam on the inside is something you can't see, and that just simply degrades after a certain amount of miles. There's a lot of other factors that play into it. If you're a heavy, runner, if your pavement's going to degrade the foam down a lot more sometimes than trail will. So a lot of these shoes, Nike, Adidas, what have you, they're rated for 250, maybe 350 miles. The Mount to Coast, if you look into them, nice enough for you to drop the link there. Everybody can research them. They are rated for around 1,000 miles. They're saying you can get upwards out of these things. Now, mine have about 600, which again is more than another shoe counterpart would usually get. Not quite 1,000, but hey, they're still kicking. And they got me through this race. I didn't have any foot issues. Also, which is another big thing. No stomach issues, no foot issues. What I mean by foot issues, because I did have that, the cramping issue. But what I mean when I speak about foot issues in this way is like a loss of toenails, blisters. I didn't get any of those. I might have gotten like 1 or 2 blisters for the whole 180-mile race, which I'll take. Didn't lose any toenails. So very thankful for Mount to Coast and their footwear.
Yes, thank you very much. And Mount to Coast is a new company to me, but I am quite interested in having shoes that last a long time. I tend to wear out my shoes perhaps more than I should, but I will often spend 600 to 800 miles in one pair of shoes before switching it out. But I find when I do switch it out, I feel better. My knees feel better. I don't have as many lingering pains after my runs. So it would be intriguing to explore some shoes that could last longer. If they could last 1,000 miles, that would be wonderful. And also, of course, one advantage of you having a crew during the RTO was that you could switch out shoes, and that enabled you to pick out the best shoes for the terrain that you were traversing at the time. Now, Mike Lazine also wonders about nuts as a source of protein. He likes peanuts and walnuts. Do you consume nuts as part of your diet, and what would be a good place for them as part of a running training regimen? Like, some foods are better to eat closer to the run, other foods are better to eat maybe a few days before your race.
Yeah, good question. I love nuts. I'm a Brazil nut fanatic myself. But yeah, I love healthy fats, like we mentioned, the avocado, the nuts, all that good stuff. I'm probably going to do that post run, like say it's a workout day or something like that. I'm probably going to get my fats, my nuts, all that kind of stuff in, because it does have that little bit of protein in there too for recovery purpose. I'll probably do that post run. Nuts for me are a good like work time snack. Like in my office drawer, I usually have a protein bar, a handful of nuts, you know what I mean? A piece of fruit, usually on deck. I try to have that almost all the time, kind of cover all the bases. So which actually I usually do for the most part. Like when I'm working throughout the day, I don't really sit down to like one big meal, but I'm usually eating something throughout my 10-hour day, like every couple hours, whether again, it's a bag of nuts, it's an apple, I'm trying to kind of graze throughout the day. I find that it keeps my energy levels a lot more on an even keel. And then I obviously sit down to a pretty big dinner when I get home, but then it's dinner and then I can just go to bed. So that carb coma doesn't really affect me. Yeah, so love the nuts, usually snacking on those, and really big snacker just in general.
Yes, well, snacking is good for keeping one's energy levels up and not taxing the digestive system too much. Now, I'm curious also to hear you discuss more about tapering before a race and recovery after a race, because I remember it was, I think, about a week and a half after the RTO that you joined us again for the McKellar Running Club to do a little 5K with us for the first time. So that recovery from running 182 miles was different from the recovery from running a shorter race. Like this morning, I ran a 10-kilometer race up at altitude at Spooner Lake, but I don't feel particularly different, and I can just go about my day. If I run a half marathon, I can just go about my day. If I run a marathon, I might take a day not running, and I might walk somewhat slowly the next day. But about 2 days after that, I'm fine. But for really long distances, like what you did, you need more recovery. So how do you feel in the days and then in the weeks after achieving that kind of feat, and also preparing for it? How essential is the tapering in the sense that you would run less a certain amount of time before the race? Is it feasible to just run not a regular amount, but maybe like half of your regular amount, which would be my regular amount, before a race like that? Or would that be too much still?
Yeah, very good question. The taper, I'll start there, was very important. I didn't really taper any longer than I would for a marathon. I usually step down in volume 2 weeks out for any race, which kind of odd, but like even a 26.2 mile race to a 180 mile race, that it's still the same step down, I would say, 2 weeks out. What I try to focus on when I'm tapering is a reduction in volume, but not so much intensity. I've kind of changed that up a little bit lately. I used to just reduce everything. I used to reduce my speed, of which I was running those miles at, along with the miles themselves. Now what I started to do was I would reduce the miles, the mileage, right, the volume, but I would not reduce the pace I was running at. I would keep the same pace up, and that's allowed me to feel a lot more fit going into these races, and it hasn't added any fatigue. So that's what I started doing. It's really worked for me on the tapering end. And yeah, the recovery, funny enough, because like I said, this, this whole running, especially running 100-mile plus races is very new to me. Last year was my first 200-mile races. I ran both the Canyons endurance runs in April, and then I followed that up with the Los Angeles Crest 100-mile race in August of last year. And when I went into Canyons, I was, greenhorn into the whole 100-mile thing. My life was about to be changed forever, and it really was. And I was asking all my mentors, all my training partners that had done 100-mile races, like what should I do after, as far as recovery? Like, how long should I wait? Because kind of like you said, Gennady, I'm like, okay, marathon, 50K, I'll take a day and maybe 2 days, and then we're right back at it. Not 100%, but we're running at least. We're shuffling. But something like this, man, ligaments, bones, joints, they need time to heal. They need time to adapt to the stimulus you gave it, and hopefully get stronger from it. Right, kind of like we talked about, right? A race is just a workout to the body. But if you don't give it that recovery time, then you're just continuously damaging the body. And so, what is enough for something like that? And one of my really good friends, Lauren Watson, who has done many more 100-milers than I have. She's from the Silver State Strider Running Club here in Reno that I was mentioning earlier. She told me, she recommends, and I try to take her recommendation when I can, that for every 10 miles you race, you take 1 day for those 10 miles off. So i.e., if you're doing a 100-mile race, you take 10 days off. 180-mile race, probably should have taken 18 days off. Did I? No, I didn't. But I took like 10. It was, it was more than half the recommendation. But I really do think, to be honest with you, and thank you, Lauren, that's very good advice. So hopefully that helps some folks out too. The 1 day for every 10 miles you run, which I think it's spot on too. If you really think about, like, even what we were mentioning, the marathon, right? That's 2.6 days, 2-3 days right off. That's fairly adequate. If you haven't done anything major during that marathon, you should be able to get back to shuffling a couple of days after that. So, yeah.
Yes, thank you. That is good advice. And I know Lauren as well, and she has done numerous of these ultra races. So she knows that of which she speaks. Now, you also focus on strength training, and I'm curious as to what you consider the relationship between strength training and endurance training to be, and what kind of strength training helps with running. Because sometimes, to me, at least with certain people, there seems to be a trade-off. That is to say, if one does strength training to bulk up, that means one has more mass to carry around when running, and one could be really strong. That could be muscle rather than fat, but it would still weigh one down when running. But there could be other types of strength training that actually help runners. So what would those be?
Yeah, very good question. So for me, I strength train, and I strength train my athletes in a way of kind of like you were saying, not really necessarily looking to put on weight or to bulk up. But what I'm really trying to do in the gym with my running is I'm trying to build durability, and I'm trying to build longevity, right? And I'm also trying to stay uninjured. That's where I really believe strength training is done for myself and my clients most is, you hear about, runner's knee or shin splints or plantar fasciitis, all these common overuse injuries that a lot of runners get. I really believe if you train, the body in the gym, especially the posterior chain, so like your back, your hamstrings, the back of the body, because that really takes a really big beating when you run, then you'll really try, or your body should avoid these common overuse injuries. So that's a really good question. And I do think that's kind of a misconception for most people that go to the gym, is they're looking to build muscle when they go there. But I really try to focus on just maintaining muscle, staying durable and staying uninjured, because if I get injured, that's time I have to take off of my training. That's, that might be a race that I have to cancel, right? So I really want to stay healthy. if I can. And especially for males too, just promoting the strength training builds testosterone. So I really try not to focus on what the gym does just for my running, but also what it does for me as a human, essentially.
Yes, thank you. Strength training as injury prevention. That is a different way of looking at it and quite valuable for runners. Now, more life please wonders, are you thinking that this 182-mile run is the longest that you will ever do? Or do you ever think, well, 200 is a nice even number of miles, maybe someday, especially since, well, 182 miles are not that far from 200, at least relatively speaking. So do you have any ambitions to do longer distances?
Yeah, I don't get me wrong. When I crossed the finish line at 182 miles, I was very, very happy to be done running. Like I was very happy to not have to move my feet anymore, other than to get to the car, which was probably the hardest mile of the whole 182. But I was very happy to be done. However, that being said, definitely could have kept running. And I believe you are correct in the fact that 200 sounds like a nice round even number. So I believe that not gonna name any names, but I think we'll have a 200 miler in our future for sure.
Interesting. So stay tuned. I think there will be a lot more to Fitz's progress and his running career as the years unfold. By the way, Art Ramon writes that he lost a lot of upper body muscle when he built up to 8-mile runs, going from 220 pounds to 205, comparable to comparable runners doing higher mileage were around 180 pounds at his height. So that's interesting. And yes, running, if you run a net calorie deficit and running contributes to that, you will lose muscle as well as losing fat. So that's why a lot of runners are lean. They don't have a whole lot of bulky musculature to them, but that enables them to be faster. But that's an interesting observation, Art Ramon. So Mike, thank you very much for joining us over the past 2 hours, telling us your story. You have provided some amazing insights and inspiration. And by way of parting, first of all, if you could tell our audience a bit more about what services you offer as a coach. I know Daniel Tweed wondered, are you getting more fitness clients because of your achievement? And maybe some of our audience members might be interested in having you as a trainer, a coach, somebody who guides them through their fitness journey, but also tell us more about your long-term plans. What do you hope to get out of running, out of fitness? Of course, in the Transhumanist Party, we prioritize longevity, living as long as possible, as healthily as possible. So do you see in your future, perhaps 50 to 60 years down the road, you continuing to achieve these amazing feats in running or in other areas of fitness?
No, thank you for that. And I am a strength coach here in Reno, Nevada for a gym called Stimulus Health and Fitness in South Reno. Again, strength coach. So I specialize in strength and conditioning in the gym. Also, I do run coaching online. If you would like to inquire about that, you can reach me on Instagram. That's from Fat to Fits is my handle. And yeah, actually, I've had a lot more interest since the RTO came out in terms of my training, and I'm very thankful for that. And that's really all I'm trying to do with this whole, running thing that we started in 2022, right? Is just to build a network of people that really believe in themselves because that's sometimes has been an issue for me coming from being obese. You know, I kind of sometimes will get that imposter syndrome, like, hey man, are you even qualified to be in the space of elite ultra runners, right? Like you came from, you know, a podunky farm in Pennsylvania and you hated PE as a kid, right? But, you know, I urge people that might have those thoughts about themselves to look at the evidence behind what they've done, right? Like you wouldn't be in the space you're in the company you're in if, you know, you weren't qualified to be there, right? So I just hope that with this, a lot more people, you know, have a lot more self-confidence in themselves. And yeah, I really hope I'm running in my 70s and my 80s, because for me, you know, running has given me something I've never had before, right? It's given me my best friends. It's given me the opportunity to travel the world. I've been to Berlin, Asia for running. So yeah, man, like I haven't found a replacement for that sense, and it means a lot to me. And so yeah, I'm gonna keep running for as long as I can.
Yes, keep running for as long as you can. That is the goal. And to everybody else, no matter what you choose to do in your life, keep doing it for as long as you can. If it brings meaning and value and fulfillment to you, we are all about maximizing our potential as humans, maximizing our longevity, our ability to do what we find meaningful. And Mike, thank you so much for joining us today. I hope as a result of your comments and your story, we can all live long and prosper.